The item second, just to put on the table for discussion.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor Cashmore. Deputy Mayor. Sweet. And anybody else up there with you now? Not that I think you. Oh, there you go. Just want to welcome both, and Doctor, for those that may not know who's up there, can you introduce them, please?
Chair, yes, beside me we have Phil Brown, who heads the biosecurity team, and Imogene Bassett, who's been working on this, the regional pest management plan, the draft of it, or the proposed plan for consultation for most of this year, actually. So it's been a big package of work for her.
Okay, so look, I'm just going to hand it straight over to you, Doctor, and all yours.
Thank you. It's not driving.
Is it
not on? Oh.
Hold on, we'll just.
Oh, there we go. Okay. No? There we go. Great. Sorry. So I've just got a really quick presentation just to go over the really the process issues around this. So those of you who have been in previous workshops on this topic will have seen this this slide a number of times, but just to sort of refresh where we are in the process. So we've had some pre-engagement with yourselves and with the wider community. And so the last time that we came to you was a workshop in October, and so at that point we had the direction from you to bring the totality of the options that were on the table for the proposed plan to today's meeting. What we're asking for today is to sign off the draft plan to go to public consultation next year, aligned with the long-term plan. So today's decision is not a budget commitment, it's just an opportunity to put this plan out to public consultation. That will be aligned with the long-term plan consultation, and then there'll be an opportunity after the long-term plan budget decisions have been made for us to look at the feedback from that process, the budget that we get, the feedback that we get on the details of the pest management elements, and then an opportunity to make revisions to the plan as required to meet that budget envelope and to take into account public feedback. And then, depending on how extensive those revisions are, we look to probably have an operative plan coming to you for adoption at the end of next year. And we recognise that some of the timelines around this have been a little bit challenging, but just to emphasise that really the pressing need for us to be here today is because we do have a requirement under the Biosecurity Act. So if we don't adopt a proposed plan before the 17th of December, then we'll be in a situation where our existing plan becomes non-operative and we will have no enforcement powers under the Biosecurity Act until such time as we adopt an operative plan. Whereas if we can put out a proposed plan, then that essentially puts us into a sort of a holding pattern where we then have as much time as is required to settle on what is a satisfactory new operative plan. And so that's a really important point, because if we lost those enforcement powers, it would have some significant impacts on some of our council programs. And then my last slide is really just to summarise what it is that we're asking you to approve today, recognising that the report that's in front of you is quite complicated, and that's because the Biosecurity Act is a very long and convoluted piece of legislation. It does require us to make a series of quite complicated steps and resolutions in a sequential format. But essentially what we're asking for is to approve a proposed plan to go out to public consultation, for you to acknowledge that we have complied with a number of steps that are set out by the Biosecurity Act, which are in one of the attachments that you have. And so largely that we are satisfied that we have complied with all of those process requirements, with the exception of Section 72, which requires public consultation. And so while we have done some consultation to date, the public haven't actually had an opportunity to see the detail of the proposed plan itself, and therefore we cannot say that we're satisfied with respect to that particular section. So that's recommendation E, that we recognise that there is some further consultation required. And then lastly, there is a particular attachment that relates to pest-free warrants, and that's because we're proposing to incorporate that by reference, which is just a special method that the Biosecurity Act provides for, which allows us to have a more dynamic living document outside of the plan itself, but it does require a recommendation in itself to satisfy that. So that's really all I had in terms of a summary, and I'm happy to take questions as required.
Thank you, Doctor. Look, all the hands are sort of shooting up. We'll just leave that particular sort of on there because it just explains all our recommendations, except for G. And G is, if you've read it, it's just getting myself and Councillor Holtz, who's on council business, around C40, and just to give us any required minor editorial changes. So I've got Councillor Sayers first, Walker, and then Councillor Casey.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Right.
Just a couple of questions.
Cool.
First one's around the consultation process. I just didn't pick it up in the literature. Would that include going up onto Shape Auckland, as we do with other documents?
Yes, it will. We're working with the long-term plan team to make sure that this is aligned as possible with the broader long-term plan consultation.
Okay, thank you very much. And my other question was just specifically around the wallaby eradication program, and particularly probably the implications on Kowal Island. I think I picked up feedback from me at the workshop, and I understand from the local board as well that that community is probably a little bit divided. I don't know if it's 50-50. So, but I guess it's just that my question is, are you aware of that situation on Kowal Island and expecting that feedback in your consultation material? We're
absolutely aware that that is definitely an issue which does polarise some members of the community, and which people do feel very strongly about it. So certainly we would see this opportunity for public consultation to be a really important opportunity to see whether there is a mandate within the community for that piece of work. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And just a final question, Mr. Chair, just still related to that. In the report, it's on page 60. It's got some words around Kowal Island that the wallabies pose a risk to the mainland. So I'm just curious, you don't have to give me the answer now, but if the question does come up about the number of historical times that perhaps wallabies have got onto the mainland, to what extent they've penetrated into the mainland from Kowal Island, and how often?
So I think, Phil can correct me if I'm wrong, but from memory, we've responded to about 3 reported sightings on the mainland in the last year or two. Obviously they don't swim, but people do move animals like this. We know further south from Auckland, wallabies are an increasingly problematic species. They are really spreading quite rapidly and with high impact. And we do know that often that is aided by people deliberately moving them beyond their existing range. So it's certainly true that having a population on our doorstep does pose a risk of deliberate human movement.
Right, yeah. Okay, very good. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
No problems at all. Councillor Walker.
Sure.
Question.
Yes. Around consultation, I note that this regional pest management plan is going to go out in tandem with the council's long-term plan. Are you proposing that people will be able to make a single submission that will effectively cover both, so that somebody that's making a submission on the regional pest management plan and covering off the numbers feeds in directly to the long-term plan. Is that the case?
I believe so, yes. We're working to make sure that those consultations are as aligned as possible so that people get one experience.
Okay, and the other question I've got, given the complicated nature of the plan, there's a number of volumes I've got here.
Indeed.
Given that there are likely to be some pests, like, say, Chilean needlegrass, carry dieback, some others that are particularly prominent, are you going to have a facility where it's going to be much easier for people to go to those and perhaps have a link that goes to the relevant parts in the plan?
We hadn't thought of hyperlinking to specific species from it, but we could possibly investigate whether it's possible from our summary document to do that. I can't speak to the technological possibility of that, but I can certainly take it to the comms and engagement team.
I would just make that recommendation, because otherwise you could be going through some hours trying to sort stuff. I think there's a priority around that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That's right. Councillor Walker, and noted. Thank you. Your suggestion. Councillor Casey.
I've got two questions. The first one's on cats and the feedback on cats. Would you like to say something in summary about the feedback?
Obviously, we recognise that cats are a very polarising issue again, but we think that what we have is something which is very much in line with the feedback that we've had from the public and from local boards and other stakeholders through the process to date, and we've tried to balance people's rights and the value of domestic cats with managing the impacts of cats in high value areas to protect native species. So we'll be interested to get further feedback on that.
Oh, I'm sure you will get further feedback. My second question relates to, it's just a puzzle to me, and the board supported it too, but how do you stop the sale of pest species from nurseries and, say, Trade Me and people's back gardens? Just tell me the mechanism.
So we have the ability to do enforcement inspections under the Biosecurity Act, so that's part of the powers that we have under these plans. So we're able to enter a nursery establishment or a pet shop and have a look to see what it is that they're selling. We can also monitor online trade as well and follow up on that.
And can you just remind me about the 13 pest animal species that you've listed?
The species list?
Yep.
Oh gosh, that's
I can.
It was 11. It's
I
gone up to
anticipated
13.
this
I'm wondering
question.
what's been
I
added.
did as well, but I failed to print it.
So the proposed species of animals that are currently traded as pets that are proposed for ban from sale: bearded dragons, Canadian geese, eastern rosellas, eastern water dragons, galahs, goldfish.
No, sorry.
Sorry,
Goldfish.
Sorry, we are proposing to add goldfish as a pest, but outside of containment, so it wouldn't ban sale, but it would just give us a mechanism to remind people that as part of responsible pet ownership, it's not a good idea to dump your unwanted goldfish into the local waterway.
Hence my upward intonation there. I needed to read the other columns as well as the header column. Hedgehogs, Indian ringneck parakeets, magpies, monk parrots, rainbow lorikeets, red-eared slider turtles, snake-neck turtles, and sulphur-crested cockatoos.
Thank you.
What's really excited turtles?
Red-eared slider
Oh,
turtles.
sorry. I thought you said really excited turtles.
Some people do find them exciting.
Okay, sorry, Member Brown. Sorry.
Really excited.
So how does the plan advance us towards pest-free 2050?
It's very aligned with that kind of step change in the sense that we're looking to prioritise small mammal eradications on offshore islands and also landscape scale possum control across the mainland. So it is looking to that step change kind of space of where are the next big things that the country really is moving towards.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, is it not in alignment to the national?
It certainly does, yes.
Thank you. I'll just reserve this. Yeah. Oh, no, sorry. So, why are we not... At the last meeting, I'd raised it over the issue with the proposed 1080 drop to Hunua, insofar as that being, for us, as Māori, terminology is a big thing. So, in that example, the new approach is eradication, given the national shift from, say, the 2014-15 Māori impact statement and consultation stuff is a bit different today than it is, or it was back then, and appreciate you talking to iwi. But I'm just wondering why or at what point, you know, the term eradication can be included and bolded so everybody can see it, because control and management are ongoing issues around where's the end point. So maybe it's a question for the committee around.
And we'll put that question as in what I'm assuming you're asking is around including the word eradication or eradicate in the actual name alongside either before or after management. That's where we're heading. So we'll open that discussion after any questions. I've only got one more question. Then we'll open up into comment and debate. Yeah. So I'll just get through the question and then we'll open it up, because I think it's a point that needs debating around the word eradicate or eradication in the name. Imogen, did you want to say it now until we, or after we?
Well, I'm happy to comment quickly, and then if you want...
We're still going to end up bringing it forward anyway as part of the discussion.
Okay.
Councillor Newman.
Hello. Dr Bassett, with respect to cats again, the Council's response, you referred to cats will be defined as pests if they are not able to be identified as being owned by microchip or accompanying registration of the New Zealand Companion Animal Register. Now, I know the focus here is on the higher biodiversity value area, including council parklands and offshore islands, but are you ready for the response from the community in relation to the kind of approach there in relation to cats, because there is a high premium on the value of the domestic mog? I think that the way in, I can understand the value proposition here, but I don't necessarily believe that the community itself is going to fully appreciate that, and the best communication strategy under the sun is not going to allay all concerns. So we're ready for that, because I think that that's something that's going to really flavour the forthcoming discussion on this document.
We certainly take your point. We are aware that there is some potential for some strong media interest in that and community interest in that. We are obviously working with the communications team to make sure we manage that as well as possible. We have had a small amount of media on this issue off the back of this coming to local board reports, and so far,
coming.
Yeah, but so far it has been reasonably positive, and we do realise that there's a balance to be struck, and we hope we can manage it as well as possible.
One of the questions that we'll cut through, I won't make a comment, Mr Chair, but one of the, you may want to respond to this, one of the issues that will arise will be how practical is the issue of the chipping and the identification, the registration process, given the number of cats and the way in which owners feel about them. They're treated a bit different to the dog.
Yeah, and look, I think microchipping is increasingly being recognised as a best practice pet ownership behaviour. We know in the last 5 years between reporting intervals that actually nationally the proportion of cats that have been voluntarily microchipped anyway has risen from, I think, maybe 11 or 16%. Something like, or maybe 7%, so quite low numbers. Back in 2011 is now up around a third of cats are microchipped, because people are recognising that this is beneficial to their cat. They get their cat back if it gets lost. And so I think there's an increasing acceptance. This is actually quite an easy, good thing to do as a cat owner, irrespective of issues around the biodiversity.
Yeah, this is why it's important that it goes out for consultation. So look, there's no question. Yep. And then I'm going to open it up around Member Brown's suggestion, which I recall that we had the discussion about earlier. Yep.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Deputy Mayor.
So, guys, well done on preparation of all this. It's very aspirational. The question that has to be asked, though, is your budget's increasing massively, over threefold, potentially. So how are you going to counter over-enthusiastic expectations?
Look, this will be going out with the long-term plan, and I guess it is Aucklanders' opportunity to signal where their preferences lie. But we do need to be realistic about the fact that there is a likelihood that this will need to be revised following decision on the budget envelope.
So I note you signal that in the report quite well about the 10-year budget, but will you be putting out in the consultation document what are, say, people's priorities, or a second potentially deliverable or third deliverable for people to actually ascertain? Because what we see in the public is they don't often join up the dots. Everyone wants a perfectly weed-free world, except when it arrives in their rates bill. So how are we going to make sure people join those dots together?
Well, clearly there's some challenge there, and it will be very interesting to see what the Mayor's proposal comes forward with, because this is going through the LTP process, and we've put up a fully costed option, and we've also put up a much more modest investment option, and so I guess it'll be up to the Mayor and yourselves to shape that.
Perhaps if I might just add that the situation we're in, and I think it says it in here, is that under current funding we're actually into managed decline. So that's the situation we are in. It is quite difficult to commit to what do you really get for this amount of money in the environment space, because it doesn't quite work that way. And this will be something that through the consultation process we will need to address as to what can we do if the funding is less than the amount that's set out here for this proposed plan, and we will then have to go through a process of revising the plan, reprioritisation and so forth. It's not an easy exercise for those reasons, but what the point you raise is clearly noted, and the team is very well aware of the issue there.
Thanks.
Okay. Questions before we end up debating the eradicate?
It was just a question. Probably. Oh, okay, maybe it's a comment. So it's fine.
Okay. Cool. So look, let's go back into. It's been moved in second. Sorry, Councillor Walker. And look, I'm just going to get into Member Brown. I'm just going to invite yourself again in regard to the comments around your suggestion.
First of all, don't have an issue generally with the recommendations, and support our Deputy Mayor, our Council's interest around the 350+% increase in the budget. I'm certainly going to join the over-enthusiastic community on some ideas on how that can be properly and responsibly invested on the matter. So the matter's not a showstopper today, but inevitably for some future committee it is, because management at the year 2040, 2045 is going to run out of time. And I know intimately that external to the community that at least 4 mana whenua who are involved in the 1080 discussions in Hunua are committed, and I understand with council officials, to somehow addressing the terminology to move it towards eradication, using that as an example. And so for the life of me, I can't see why the Hunuas out the southeast is going to have its own little show going on when it could be compelled by a greater regional policy that doesn't accommodate it, at least in terminology. So not a showstopper today, Mr Chair, but inevitably for some council committee they will face this question, because our council officials are going to run out of management time. And I'm not saying let's all jump in and be over-enthusiastic today. Well, okay, I am. Thank you, that's all I've got to say.
Okay. So, Member Brown, in regards to, as the report around number 3, national policy direction and eradication, are you suggesting that maybe the word could be included in the regional pest management and eradication plan, or I don't know, this is...
Well,
Imogen?
So, I mean, I would say that in some sections of the plan, we are quite clearly stating an eradication outcome. So, for instance, for Kawo, for Waiheke, we are talking about eradication for multiple small mammals. I do hope that in the long term, someone will be sitting here talking about eradication of, for instance, possums, rats across the whole region. But at the moment, from a technical point of view, what we're proposing and what we're really actually technically able to deliver at this point is not eradication in all instances.
And I accept that, but I'm hoping you'd accept that inevitably what I'm talking about is awaiting a future official and a future committee.
And we do see this as being a step on the path towards that long-term outcome for some of those species. Yep.
Yes, so on that then, and it's not for today, but there's obviously going to be some form of KPIs to measure those models, sites and stuff to achieve those outcomes. But again, and I'm thinking in the over-enthusiastic community, we achieve those. And then the next natural human thing to do is find the next place to continue to emulate that success. So why on earth wouldn't we put, you know, maybe it's not the term eradication, but pest-free is actually the national term, and eradication is the method to get there. So, like I said, not a showstopper today, but inevitably it's facing us somewhere.
We have also signalled in the strategic front end of the document, we've also signalled the alignment of this document with the wider pest-free Auckland aspiration and also predator-free 2050 at that national level. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Now, Councillor Sayers is not here, so Councillor Hills.
Kia ora. Once again, just thank you. I know this is going to be a massive debate, but I think we need to sort of stop beating around the native bush and focus on...
Very good.
I think that the consultation documents and what needs to come to us is actually, we keep focusing on the cost, but it is about investment and what the future cost is going to be. And it's with a lot of the debates, like the water debate we're going to have as well. Obviously we're constrained financially, but I think we need to be pretty clear what we're sending to people is that it's either investing this much, which you could have bought us a $2 billion program, you could have, but you are trying to bring us into a reasonable space that we could try and afford. But I think if we don't get to this top amount, we're going to look at, you know, species being wiped out. We're going to look at the Kauri dieback spreading even further. We're going to look at the hunuas being ripped apart by possums. So I think we need to be really careful about what we send out, because if you put out 3 options, this will cost you this, inevitably a lot of people are just going to look at the dollars. But it's about showing some pretty stark, you know, this is what you get for this investment, this is what you get, this is what you get. It's not so much about, because, you know, the average person doesn't want to pay more for things, but it's, do you want to look over the back of the, you know, parts of our community and see it all being ripped apart, or the birds no longer come and sing. So I think we need to be a bit bolder and more aggressive with our strategy. You know, it is what do you want? So I'm really excited about the direction, but as we know, this will not be enough. But also, we need to be talking to government. I know they're already saying they want to restore some of the DOC funding. They want to be putting more money into Kauri dieback. So how can we partner with them? I know we'll be doing that work, but I think if the public saw a willing of us to join up more of that work and not be as piecemeal as maybe we have in the past based on money. But I think it is about what our options are truly going to be in 10 to 20 years of what is left, what we're leaving behind. So, yeah, thank you.
Cool. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I just want to congratulate you on your report. It's huge, but it's actually got all the detail there if you wade through it. So I think you've put a lot of time and effort in, and I thank you very much for that. I think the issue that I just want to flag is that it's about Aucklanders understanding the detail of what's in here and their perception. I, for one, I've learnt a lot by reading, the 7 telephone books that you've left for us to read. I didn't know there was a Mickey Mouse plant, and I didn't know that Nemo the goldfish caused so much trouble when you stuck him, you didn't want him anymore, and you stuck him in the little stream thinking he would be happily ever after, So I think there also needs to be some education around why you're doing this, and actually that behaviours that people have used for generation, that agapanthus is great, holds the bank up, stick it in and it shall be right, that jasmine smells nice and it will just crawl through and look fantastic. I think there's more to it than just how much it's going to cost and we're trying to get rid of pests. I also want to make the comment that this is going to be up against every infrastructure project, every local board project and everything else at a time of incredible fiscal restraint. And again, around your knowledge and the communications and engagement we're going to have in our communities, I actually think, Mr. Chair, that it would be very useful to have staff from Imogen's team there in those key Have Your Say events to actually really help people understand what's involved.
We'll have to increase the comms budget.
Well, it's not necessarily the comms budget, it's an engagement budget.
Okay.
I just do. I just think that
Take it on board.
that will maybe be something.
Yep.
Either that or you're going to have to give us some really good bullet points.
We are looking to align with the long-term plan and recognising that there are a large number of those Have Your Say events, but maybe to provide strategic staff support into the ones where we know we're most likely to have people coming along with interest.
That's it. The key
Yep.
areas that might be difficult.
Good suggestion. Taken on board. Councillor Clay? No? Councillor Casey?
I think I just want to echo what Councillor Simpson and Councillor Hills have just said. The protection of our flora and fauna is right up there with swimming in our harbours. I think everybody wants that for the future. And the message that you haven't quite sent out yet, which needs to be sent out yet, is the status quo is going backwards. Now, you said it, but that is absolutely crucial. We cannot maintain the environment with the current level of funding. In fact, even your higher level of funding is not enough. It's not enough. So the message that you are giving Aucklanders is a political message, and I'm not sure how we're going to weave that into the consultation here. How do you get that message? That is a really important message. The funding has to be given. Has to be given. How do you relay that message in the documentation?
Well, yes, and this does align with the long-term plan, so I guess we haven't quite landed that yet, but certainly what we've been putting up into that process is the comparison between that managed decline, as Barry just said, versus protecting prioritised species and places in the fully costed plan.
But there's a difference between using phrases like managed decline and saying the status quo is going backwards. If you fund us to the same level, you will lose more native bush, you will lose more species from Auckland. And that's the bit. I think you need some political help to write your LTP.
That's where G is. At the moment, G is just with both Penny and I, just to have a look at the questions and comments around the long-term plan. That's that one there. And then also I've included, as in through the chair, included a member of the Independent Māori Statutory Board as well. The consultation questions and I mean, taking on board what you've said.
Minor editorial changes. I think there needs to be some major ones if you're really going to get the public on. I think you've got them on their hearts and minds, but you know, I think Alfie said it. When it comes to being in your rate bill, it's different. So you need to join up the hearts and minds with the fact that this is the cost of it.
Good suggestion. Thank you.
Yep, taken on board. Okay, if there's no further questions, comments, just want to say again, Doctor, to you and the staff, thank you so much for this document. And it's been moved and seconded, so I'll put that recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Safe swim. Here we go.